A number of months ago, we were talking about what was going to happen in the new museum. This time we can say mission accomplished, at least partial mission accomplished, and we can talk about what is happening at the new museum. Before we do that, we left a couple things on the table for you. Please feel free to take those if you'd like. That's some information on our membership and also our concert schedule, our NMM Live concert schedule for this fall. We'll reference that here in a couple of minutes because there are a couple of concerts that feature instruments that are now in the museum. There are instruments, and they're historic instruments. So if you want to hear those, this would be a great opportunity. Also on the table is a notepad. So as you're sitting at home or at your desk writing on the National Music Museum notepad, we hope that you will remember us. Our lights are on and our doors are open, so please take that as our gift. I am especially pleased today to have one of our museum staff members as my guest here, and he's going to be joining me here in just a couple of minutes, and we'll be taking part in a bit of show and tell of a musical instrument. Dr. Darryl Martin is our conservator at the museum. That's a specific position where he tries to make sure that all of the instruments are in display-ready condition, that they're in good repair, if they're playable instruments, that they're always maintained and kept up. He is also the head of our Master of Music program. You might not be aware that we have the only Master of Music program in conjunction with the USD Music Department with a specialization in the history of musical instruments because we have the museum here. It's designed as a small program, a couple of students every year. That's been on hiatus for 5 years since we've been closed. We restarted that this fall. We have one student who has enrolled in that, and Darryl's recruiting some other students as a part of that. So he came in to head up that program. Dr. Darryl Martin grew up in Australia, spent most of his time in the UK. We found him about a year ago in Ghent, Belgium, where he was working, and we said, we know the dream of your life is to move to Vermillion, South Dakota. And he said, well, of course. And so he came to Vermillion, South Dakota. Probably not to work with us. He loves our collection. He knew of our collection. But Darryl, raise your hand, stand up. Thank you very much. I hope you'll get a chance to meet Darryl. Really, among the museum conservators in the world, he is right up there among the top. In fact, everybody told us, if you can get Darryl to come to the National Music Museum, you've pulled off a coup. So fortunately, he was ready to leave Belgium and come to South Dakota. So enough of that. Let's talk about where we are at right now. Is there anybody here who doesn't know anything about the National Music Museum? Because if you're already familiar with it, we can sort of skip over some of it because you're already aware. But in the last couple of years, we've taken some great strides forward. The Little Bridge wing, which is the new wing onto the building, opened in 2021. Then in 2022, the NMM Board of Trustees approved us to invest about $4.25 million to do the first floor galleries. That's our phase one. And that was what we just reopened at the end of August. The phase one was completed. The board is now considering whether or not we have the money together to go on to phase two to complete the second floor. When we get the second floor completed, all of the museum will be done. But we've taken it a pay-as-you-go, and we are happy to say that all of the money has been raised for the first floor. All those bills have been paid. Now we look to phase two. So that's where we're at right now. What makes the NMM so special? You're probably aware that we have one of the largest and most prestigious collections of musical instruments in the world. In fact, when we were talking to Darryl in Belgium, and one of our board members asked him, how would you rank the collection of the National Music Museum among musical instrument collections in the world? And he said, easily among the top 3. So this is the reputation and the prestige that we have. We have over 14,000 instruments in our collection. And by the way, we're not done yet. You'd think that we pretty well, hit the limit at 14,000 plus, but not yet. And we'll show you a couple of those in a minute. If you'd like to take a peek from your computer, you can log on to our eMuseum website, which Kevin O'Kelly has provided some accolades for that. We don't have all of our instruments up there. We're in that process, but we have a few thousand up there that you can look. You can drill down into specific categories. Do you want stringed instruments? Do you want plucked instruments? Do you want whatever? And you can look at some of the things in the collection and find out some information. We have now new and renovated facilities, and the best thing is it started in South Dakota. It's South Dakota made, and this is where we're going to stay. So let's take a look at what we have on exhibit right now. Our Good as Gold 50th anniversary exhibit is now open in the Jason and Betsy Groves Special Exhibition Gallery. That Special Exhibition Gallery means that we can rotate those exhibitions out whenever we feel the need to do that. As opposed to permanent exhibitions, those things are going to stay there pretty much permanently. But we invite you to come in. That will be open until the end of this year, and then we'll swap it out again as we get into 2024. But let's take a look at what we've done for the first floor galleries. So on the first floor of the National Music Museum, we have 7 brand new galleries that we just opened. This is one of the first panels that you'll see when you come in. Not a great picture, you'll see it in living color when you go in. But wrapped around the umbrella theme of the role musical instruments play in our lives, we're telling the story as you walk through these 7 galleries. And one of the things I'd like to highlight is this set of markations over here on your left, my right, which says highlights, musicians, and family. So as the designers put together the museum, they said, we want to make a museum for the streaker, the stroller, and the scholar. Now, that's not a salacious term, but it was the idea of how people interact with museums. Some people come in, they've only got a half an hour, they sort of buzz through and they're out the door. That's the streaker. That's where you'd want to look at the highlights. If you only have a few minutes, look for that icon and that will sort of guide you through the museum. If you're a stroller, you want to spend an hour or a couple of hours, and you're really interested in musicians and masters of music, you look for that icon. If you have a family with you, you look for the family icon, and that will help guide you through. Of course, you're welcome to go at your own pace, but these are just things that we think that are really important for you to see depending on how you come in and interact with the museum. These are actual pictures of the new museum. So you can tell things have changed if you remember the old museum. Carpeted floor, lots of gallery cases, instruments wall to wall, which was great. We're taking a little bit scaled back approach, but as you walk into the museum, you'll see that there's brand new casework. All the renovations have been done. The flooring has been changed. You will find all kinds of reader rails. Those are the long rails with the text down there, so you can read your way along. And every instrument is identified, so you can say, oh, instrument number 6. You look down in panel number 6, and it tells you everything you need to know about that particular instrument. We move into another gallery. And this is the Music and Spirituality and Music in the Home gallery. At the very end is one of the 2 organs that we have on display. That is the Christian Diefenbach organ that came from a church in Pennsylvania. And that will be featured, we will be playing that instrument on Friday, October 13th at noon. So that is a playable instrument. As it sits in the gallery, the audience for that recital will take our chairs into the gallery itself and sit there and listen to the instrument play. So where that's possible, we certainly want to do that. And then here's another shot of a different zone. This happens to do with, it says the power of music, strength to unite or divide. This is about the use of musical instruments in military applications, war, festivals, military bands, those types of things. So as you can see, lots of information in one corner. The box that you see about in the middle, that's a listening station. So we have both audio and video listening stations at points throughout the galleries. You can walk up, there are 3 musical examples there. You push it, you can hear a 30-second sound sample of whatever is described. If we do have a sound sample of a particular instrument that's on display, it will say that. This is instrument number so-and-so, played by such and such, and you listen to the selection. All right. One of our favorite galleries is the American Guitar Gallery. And so this is really a special gallery. You can see this is just one room. There's a side room to it that is the workshop. So we invite you to come in and take a look at that. Lots of information that traces the history of guitar, how important it has been to every aspect of American music. Everything from the ukulele to the harp guitar to the banjo uke to the avant-garde, DeQuisto avant-garde prototype, which is an archtop guitar versus a blues guitar versus all kinds of things. So if you're a guitar aficionado, you definitely want to take a walk into. It doesn't show it in this picture, but just off to your left, my right, in this corner is a jukebox. And so if we have a sound sample of any of those guitars, you can go over there and you can punch up, I want to hear the Johnny Cash guitar. You punch that up and there's a song that could have been used on that with that particular guitar. So it's a really wonderful interactive experience. One of the things that we have become very fond of is this wall. It's the personal expression wall. So we give you the opportunity when you come into the museum that if you want to take a moment, you'll see on the table there are slots where there are 3 cards, and you can pick a card with a topic: feeling, playing, or favorites. How does music make you feel? Do you play music? If so, why? And what's your favorite musical group or your favorite piece of music? So it's just prompts, and you can sit for a moment, fill out that card, put it on the wall, so patrons that come after you can read anything that you want to share. You can choose to sign it or not. Many people have not. But I can tell you, we've already had all 5 of those slat walls filled up once, and now we're working on the second round. And it's really fun to go through the stack of cards and write what people read. In a few words, it is so powerful and it's so poignant about how they interact with music. So that's where we're at right now in the history of the National Music Museum. All the first 4 galleries are open. Special exhibition gallery is open. We hope that you will come and visit us. Our hours are Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and then on Saturdays from 12 noon to 4 p.m. So we're looking ahead. We're looking ahead to the second floor. When we get that open, then we can say we're fully completed, and we'll be talking about whatever the next step in the National Music Museum is. But let's take a moment and look at some of the things that we're doing now. We have put our acquisitions mostly on hold, which means we're not taking in new instruments unless something really interesting, unique, or rare comes along. This is an actual picture of this instrument as it was sitting in the home of Gary Nelson in Williston, North Dakota. Not my hometown, but my home state. So I was pleased to go up there just a few weeks ago, pick up this instrument from his living room as he donated it to the National Music Museum. It took 6 of us to get it out of his house. The thing is a beast. It is heavy. This is a story-tone piano introduced in 1939 at the 1939 New York World's Fair. This is an important instrument in the evolution of home musical instruments. And that's one of the things that we try to do. This was a gap in our collection that we didn't have, and the curators have put together a list that said, oh, if we could ever find one of these or one of those, and this was one of those. And he called us and said, we're moving out of our house into an assisted living center. This has been in our family for a long time. Would the museum like it? And we said, you bet, we'll be there next week. And we went up and we picked it up.
I have a quick question. How deep is that?
It's about as deep as an upright piano.
Okay, so are the strings going this way or that way?
Yeah, so very interestingly, this is what's considered to be the first electric piano ever made, in that there are the keys and the strings and the action are just like a regular piano, but there's no soundboard, so you don't have the crook length and the length of a regular piano. There's electric pickups inside the piano then that project the sound through what looks like those 2 legs are actually speakers. And so it's the first electric piano that forces the sound out. So it makes it very heavy. Now you can see that you can kind of see the bench. It's there in front. But what also makes this interesting is that you open the bench, there's an AM radio and a shortwave radio on this side and a phonograph on this side that through a wire can be hooked into the unit so you can play out the speakers at the same time that you're playing with it. Okay? Very interesting, very unique. So there's some information about the piano itself. So there's no soundboard, but all the strings and everything is like a regular piano.
Is it on display now?
It's not. It's sitting at our Center for Preservation and Research. We just got it back, so the curators and the conservator need to do all their magic with it. We'll probably bring it back to the museum at some point. If there are 6 or 10 of you that want to help us move it, we'd be happy to. Yeah. All right, Darryl, come on up. So rather than just show you pictures of something, I thought we'd show you something in person. Now, that's not Darryl. He's Now, the Storytone piano was a donation, so they donated it to us. We give them a deed of gift that says whatever value it is, you can take it off your taxes. This instrument that Darryl will be unveiling in a moment is called the Grafton Saxophone. This is actually a promised gift from a donor, which means that the donor bought it for us off of auction. It's still in their possession technically for a year according to IRS guidelines, at which point then they can donate it to the museum. At any point in the next year, if they wanted it back, they could. But we have a donor who said up to a particular dollar amount, if you have something you'd like off of auction, maybe we'll consider it. So we found this Grafton saxophone, which is very rare in the history of saxophones. This is an alto saxophone. This was about 1948, we think. There are known serial numbers up to 13,000 something. This is serial number 58. So this was made early in the production. What made this so unique is that they were experimenting with how to make a saxophone that's not made of brass. So this is made of acrylic. This is actually a plastic, essentially, saxophone, except for the neck is still brass. They couldn't figure out how to do the curves and make it that it wouldn't crack. So there's lots of acrylic, lots of plastic on there. This was invented in about 1945. It started commercial production in about 1950. It has a molded plastic body and bell. At around $154 in 1950 dollars, it cost about half of a traditional brass saxophone at the time. So you can see for the starter, this might be a good instrument for them. By the way, this was not the particular instrument, but this was the model of instrument that David Bowie started playing on, was the Grafton saxophone. So in the history of, in musical history, they filled a particular niche. If you know jazz, Charlie Parker was a great jazz saxophonist. He tried this for a while. He played it for the 1953 Toronto concert, which if you look it up is considered to be the greatest jazz concert of all time. Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Max Roach on drums, Charles Mingus on bass, and I forget who was on piano. But you can find it on YouTube. He was playing a Grafton saxophone on that particular instrument. Ornette Coleman was another one. He was fairly famous in the jazz world. He bought it because he didn't have money to buy a real saxophone. He bought a Grafton sax to start out with. Now, the problem with this is not finding acrylic or plastic, but finding a technician who can work on it versus the traditional instrument, finding spare parts, making sure that the instrument didn't crack, and how do you repair it if it does crack. So all of its advantages eventually spelled its doom because it was only in production for about 10 years, and then the company went bankrupt. So that's, again, what makes it unique, is that it fills this role of instrument invention and trying to invent something new and see if it might take off as the next big thing in commercial musical instrument production. So today, most of the surviving Grafton saxophones are more for display than performance. We don't know of anybody currently who plays one of these, but they are very interesting instruments and quite delicate. So Darryl is showing that around. All right, so I'll just end with one thing in a minute, but let me just see if there are any questions and answers, anything that sort of sparked your, whetted your appetite a bit about the museum or about instruments or, yes?
Yes, I'm 1955. I'm with my family watching against Sullivan. And Charlie Parker is on the program. And Ed Sullivan says that he's playing a plastic saxophone. My father had just bought my Bundy trumpet for $125.
Yeah.
And he said to me, I wonder if they make plastic trumpets.
Yes.
Thinking, of course, it would be a lot cheaper than $125 back then, $1,400 now. So.
Yep.
But it was something, I saw Charlie Parker play something like that.
Yep. You're very well aware they do make plastic trumpets now. There's a whole mass production in China that produces sort of knockoff instruments of almost everything, and a lot of them are either all plastic or mostly plastic. So, yeah.
I noticed in the new museum you have a presentation space with a stage. And
Yes, our performance hall. Mm-hmm.
What kind of performances are coming on?
All of these performances will be on that stage. We also just got it's a new piano for us, but it's actually a 1901 Mason and Hamlin concert grand piano that graces that stage. And so we are inviting students to come over and practice on that instrument. Allie Ferris from the music department is doing her recital on November 14th on that instrument, on that stage. So community performers, university performers, students, professional performers, that is our workhorse instrument. Yeah. Anybody else? Kevin?
Well, I was reminded one of your things of the power of music, and just coincidentally, the USD History Department is sponsoring Black Orpheus, the movie Black Orpheus. You guys know the story of the Lyre of Orpheus, the power of music to change the world. It's all about that. So it's free. If you're interested in the power of music and classical mythology, it's the 25th. It's free, 7 o'clock, Black Orpheus downtown. Yep. They've always done about the power of music.
Yep, you bet. Anybody else? Yes.
Excuse me, I just lost. What's happening, what will you be doing with the next 7 galleries, or the next galleries that you are preparing when it comes time?
The second floor galleries, there will be the sound gallery, which is focusing on the acoustics of sound. Why does a saxophone sound different from a cymbal, which sounds different from a piano? So we'll be exploring the whole acoustical treatment of it. Our Italian strings gallery will be on the second floor. Some of those are on exhibit right now in the 50th anniversary exhibit, but we'll be bringing out more of the Italian strings on the second floor. There'll also be a keyboard gallery up there, focusing on music as musical instruments as arts and crafts, or as innovation like this. So for example, the inventor of the saxophone himself, Adolph Sax, didn't just walk into his workshop one day and voila, out pops the saxophone, right? It was a process of evolution and failure and trial and all kinds of things. So there'll be a gallery that will talk about how they approach building a musical instrument or trying something new. Darryl himself is an instrument builder. He's built a trumpet. His specialty is 17th century English keyboards. So I know there are many aficionados of 17th century English keyboards in the room. Darryl's your guy. Any other questions? Yeah.
As long as I'm asking, have you had to call the herd of instruments at all? I mean, you have a lot of
Yes.
instruments.
What you mean by calling the herd in museum speak is deaccessioning.
Oh, okay.
That's sort of the proper way of saying it no longer belongs in the collection, so we can dispense with it somehow. So if we say we now have over 14,000 instruments, we used to have over 15,000. So over these past few years of having been shut down and trying to live within our footprint, we've had to take a really serious and hard look at the collection. Sometimes it's because we get a better example of an instrument, so we can slide one out of the way. Sometimes we just simply decide that we have too many, or maybe they're replicas, so we only need 3 of these. Meanwhile, we've got 10 of them. We don't need to keep 10 of them anymore. So that's an ongoing process in a museum.
Do you sell those then, or how do you?
No. Officially, we can't sell them.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we can. It depends on, it's a little complicated. The original Arnie B. Larson collection, the gentleman who started the whole collection, the original Arnie B. Larson collection of about 2,500 instruments is owned by the University of South Dakota. Everything else is owned by the NMM Board of Trustees. So if it's part of the original 2,500 instruments, those have to go to state surplus, believe it or not. And occasionally we'll get somebody who will buy an instrument for $500 off of state surplus. So, but technically from a museum standpoint, it's not ethical for us to just turn around and sell an instrument, because that lessens our reputation. If Ted gave us an instrument and we turned around and sold it, we'd have no credibility for Jim to donate anything to us, because he'd have no idea if we wouldn't turn around and sell that. So there are ethics that revolve around how you dispense with any of that. Sue?
Can you talk a little bit about what goes on in the Preservation Center?
The Center for Preservation and Research. Yeah, it's a beautiful facility, 1225 Carr Street. You've probably all passed by it, even though there's no signage. That is our storage and research facility. Occasionally we open that to the public, not too often, but occasionally we open that up because we want the public to see what happens there. So we have a lab out there. We also have a photography area that we can photograph the instruments. We can store them. They can be worked on. We can go through this process of deaccessioning and really have a space where we can look seriously at the instruments.
As you know, the wife and I are great Renaissance fans. Are you going to have a display based on period time?
Well, that's an interesting idea. We think of ideas all the time for how to present objects in our collection. And doing it by time period, sometimes by instrument maker. We all know the Stradivari is a big name, but there might be some of these other makers, or interesting, unique instruments like acrylic-made saxophones. It just depends on what idea comes up, and do we have enough in our collection to form a really important exhibit around that. So it's a good idea. Yeah. I wanted to close with a few quotes that we pulled off of this wall. So music as expression. So under the cards of feeling, playing, or favorites. This is actually what people have written. This is their handwriting in pencil on the card. Under feeling, how does music make you feel? It makes me feel refreshed, complete, and sorted. You can tell that's an English person. Sorted is an English term that means sort of organized, connected. Everything's in its right place. Here's one. How does music make you feel? I don't know. It's written in some Arabic language. Don't really know. All right. Do you play music? If so, why? Sure. Music is life, and life is music. Actually, I don't know what I would do without the piano. Through this wonderful instrument, I show my feelings to the world. Bella Sanchez from Brazil, 8/26/2023. Do you play music? If so, why? Yes, I just like it. Beckett, age 5. And what's your favorite music group, your favorite piece of music? This person wrote in no order: Rolling Stones, Alter Bridge, if you don't know them, look them up. King's X, also good. Tom Petty, Rival Sons, and Joe Bonamassa. What's your favorite musical group or your favorite piece of music? Now listen to this one. Started with Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin. Went to Hank Williams and Howlin' Wolf. King Crimson with productive detours at Miles Davis, Bela Bartok, Bad Brains, Emmylou Harris, and the Anti-Pop Consortium. Currently residing at Billie Holiday and Frank Sinatra. No apologies. So we love what you have to say. We'd love for you to visit the National Music Museum. Thank you.